Oh, that'll teach me for wearing a hat first thing in the morning. Hello, welcome back to the channel. I have finally been out riding some stuff because it's getting a bit easier and the weather's been better actually as well. And I always say that, but it's true. So I've been lucky enough to get out on the new Triumph Trident just because I have a friend who has just bought himself one. If you've not seen him before, you will have done, I'm sure. Rob from the channel Motor Bob. He is loving his new toy and it's easy to see why. So let's have a little look at the intro and then let's discuss the details of the bike and how it might ride and whether or not I like it. I like it.
This has been a long time coming. I've missed this. Rolling hills, clear stretch of road. Knock it down a gear, dip it in, point it out the other end and fire. I think you're giddying up for an overtake in a second, aren't you? I can see the cogs turning. And the funny thing is, with that, if you were caught by surprise, if your mate goes for an overtake and you're not ready, there's a chance you're going to be in the wrong gear. And a little bit lacking, whereas this thing, he takes an overtake, and even if it takes me a few seconds to work out he's going for it, I can be on his tail within a split second. If you're running a triple against a twin of a similar size, the triple is always going to chase down that twin, because the twin is going to run out of that puff. And I would say, if we're guessing at where this comes alive, I'm saying 6,000 up to 10,000. That's really your sweet spot, but you can live in that all day long, and it is perfectly happy.
So Triumph announced last year that they were releasing the Trident, and everyone got very excited, including myself. Say everyone, maybe I'm lumping you into that unfairly, but you are watching a review on the Trident, so you must at least be a little bit interested. But it's just a bit of a new shift for them in terms of the bike. I know it's a revival of the name. I know it's essentially a street triple engine, or their sort of famous and much loved triple engine in a new home, new housing. It's very entry-level friendly, and it's at least a little bit uniquely styled, and they come in at £7,195, so it's an absolute bargain for the amount of bike that you get. We compared it on the day to my Ducati Scrambler, and if you buy one of those brand new, I think they're about £8,000 or somewhere around that mark. And honestly, you just get more bike with the Triumph. Now, there are certain reasons you might want to go for that instead, character being one, just the way that it feels. Or you might like a twin more than you like a triple. You might occasionally want to go off-road. You know, there's lots of different reasons that we choose the bikes we do. But it is at least an interesting benchmark if you're looking at value for money. Although, saying that, no one's ever described Ducati as a value for money brand. But seriously, compare it to any of the other bikes in its field and it is brilliant value for money. Styling and money aside though, let's talk about the actual details and how it rides. And the real big draw for me with any of these bikes from Triumph is the 3-cylinder motor. They just do so well. And yet again, they have absolutely smashed it with this one. So it's a really, really usable, really fun, really chipper engine. It is 660 cc's, as you know. It is 80 brake horsepower, I believe, at 10,250 revs. It's 64 Newton meters at 6,250 revs. And it's ride-by-wire. It's managed quite intelligently. So actually, if you're just sat and you rev it, there is a small delay that you can actually feel and hear when you twist your wrist. But when you're actually riding, that disappears entirely. Whether that's just because you don't notice it at that stage, or it's just more alive, more alert when you're actually on the road. Whatever the reason, you just don't feel it. And the best thing I can say from it is that it's just not distracting. It doesn't get in the way at all. And you can be kind of lazy with your input and it's not going to buck around or be irritating to ride. More noticeable when you get into the higher range, and I'm basing this on my experience with all the street triples that I've ridden and other kind of sportier bikes really. When you get into that top range, they can get quite sensitive to the degree where you really do have to be careful what kind of input you're giving it and just relax and ease off your wrist a little bit. But with this one, honestly, you would have to force it to misbehave. Even when you get up to sort of 10,000 revs, it's still really forgiving on the throttle.
Oh, nice. How the hell did you get around that thing? Find a spot and see how quick this thing picks up. Giddy up, man. If you hold on to that throttle, it's got a really nice, smooth pickup. I think over some of the street triples, certainly the older ones, and what the engine in this at least is closer linked with, the updates in terms of throttle control, how smooth it is, are really noticeable. And that was one of the complaints my brother had for mine, was that sometimes it'd have this choppy kind of throttle to it. Whereas on this one, that ride-by-wire is measured so cleanly, you really have to take the piss with it to get it to buck around.
You've then got a wet slip assisted clutch, and that is really light to pull, but most modern bikes are, to be honest. And then you've got 6-speed gearbox. The ratios, I think, I'm told, are quite short, and I think I noticed that as well. Although, again, first gear, not too short. If you're using that through town, it's not like you run out of it too much, or again, it gets oversensitive or irritating to use. It's very, very calm and sedate at low speeds.
I think it's geared really well. I think the 6th gear, looking at that, we're on 54 mile an hour in 6th gear, 4,000 revs, which is nothing to this bike. And you got 5th, which you'll really need. You can pretty much just supersede that and go straight from 4th to 6th if you're doing motorway stuff. And then if you're doing the twistier stuff, 2nd and 3rd. Now the other thing you might be considering with this is using it around town, and I think it's perfect for that. It's so easy to get on with. It's got all the punch you would need to be sifting through traffic. Throttle delivery is really smooth, really easy. The clutch is really light, great visibility, lots of comfort. And actually this seat, we've been in the saddle for probably about an hour now, and it doesn't feel like it's got a huge amount of cushion, but it is really comfortable.
Handling wise, again, it's forgiving, and you'll probably hear me use that word a fair amount during this review, but it is true of the bike as a whole. It's kind of sporty, but not particularly so, and not aggressively so. And on the roads we were on, I kind of appreciated that, really. If I was on a proper sports bike, I wouldn't have been as quick, I don't think, actually, around those roads, because you'd have less visibility, you'd have more weight on your wrists, and just the surfaces weren't made for it. So unless you're in optimum conditions on fantastic roads, this is the majority of the riding you'll be doing.
See, now I think this road in particular, good example of it, but if you had something too sporty, too aggressive, maybe more from the suspension standpoint, I think it would wrong foot me personally, because this is quite a bumpy road. It's got some great corners in it, but if you're getting lofted out of the seat every other corner and you're sitting too proud on the bike, or if you've got too aggressive geometry on the front and you've got those drop bars, you really wouldn't be having the best time on a road like this, which, let's be honest, is going to be the majority of domestic roads. If you're not on a track, you're going to have to put up with a little bit of to and fro-ing, a bit of bouncing. And I know personally on a road like this, I'd be loading up my hands on a sports bike, whereas on either of these, because you are sat quite upright, it doesn't throw you off your game too much.
You've got Showa suspension front and back, adjustability only for preload on the rear, and on the front you've got their Showa separate function upside down forks. Sporty enough as a ride, but not harsh enough to rattle your bones. Brakes from Nissan, nothing to shout about really. You've got 2 piston calipers on the front, 310mm discs, and a single piston and a 255mm disc on the rear. You can find better, you definitely can, but they have a really decent feel to them. You know exactly where you're at with the stopping power, which hopefully means that you're not going to, over egg it and maybe lock up the rear, which I have done on previous street triples, sometimes when it's wooden, even on the foot pedal, and this one actually has some decent feeling even through your foot, which is obviously harder to feel than your hands. You know exactly where you're at and how much you've got left for braking.
Now I know Rob's changed the levers on this one, so this isn't how you would get them as stock, but there's a really nice feel. I know the braking system is exactly the same, at least he hasn't done anything to that, and the feel, the bite that you get, it's quite nice actually. If you get it a little bit too sharp, if they're just a bit too good, that can be almost as frustrating as if they're a bit too wooden, you don't get any kind of feedback from them.
Kind of short wheelbase as well, so you've got 1,401mm as a wheelbase. It is a short bike, you can tell that just by looking at it, but it's not snappy or twitchy because it's got a decent amount of trail, so the headstock is actually pretty relaxed. Certainly from the specs that I was checking, I was surprised to see that it's about 107mm, I believe, of trail, which means that when you're picking your line, unlike much sportier bikes where you could probably adjust a little quicker, but if you're not careful, it could end up being maybe a bit twitchy. This one will hold its line absolutely dead steady all the way around the corner. And then you've got a seat height of 805mm and a wet weight, thank you Triumph, one of the only times I've ever listed their bikes in wet weight rather than dry weight, meaning that it is usable and has all of the stuff in it. And that's probably because they're proud of it, because it's 189 kilograms wet. It's light, and you definitely can feel that when you're riding.
So we have 3 levels of heated grips. Rob rather rudely called them tepid grips rather than heated grips. Let's stick it, whack it way up. Let's see how sweaty my hands get. I mean, they're warm. It's nice having them. It's nicer than not having them. But they aren't exactly roasting hot.
Then we've got the tech. So you've got your ABS, as you would expect, your traction control, as you would probably expect as well. And then you've got cancelling indicators, which aren't turn-sensitive cancelling indicators. I can't think of the actual word for that. Ignore me, but you know what I mean. The one where it actually judges whether you've leaned back up, and then it turns them off. This one is on a delay, so you flick it and it will just do a few blinks to let you know that you're turning or you're adjusting, maybe switching lanes. If you hold it on for longer, it will stay on for longer and then cancel, which is smart, and I, for the most part, got on with it. It was clever. I was trying to work out whether it was turning it off itself. The one thing I would say is that if you are early on your indication, it might cancel off a bit quicker than you might like. Say if you're on the motorway and you've got a slip road coming up and you just knock that quickly, then it might cancel again a bit too quickly. But that's a small gripe to pick up, and actually for the most part it works really well. And then you've got the display, which is really good, but you've also got turn-by-turn directions. I can't remember if that's something you get as standard or if it's something you can spec out on the bike, only because Rob has it. And he definitely has spec'd that thing out to the nines. Everything you can throw at that bike, he definitely has. But you can stick that on the dash. I didn't use it on the day, but it's an option for you there. Looking at the display though, it's really crystal clear. It has this nice kind of digital / analog feel. Obviously it's a round clock, but when you've got things like the gear indicator, it sort of looks like it cycles through, so you can see the number just to the side of it, and it's just a nice way of using that. It's not particularly special. I'm sure it's not particularly expensive, but it just works really well and looks really pretty. Nice choice of color as well, with the crisp blue that they've gone for, and everything is just really easy to read.
It does feel like a baby cousin to the Street Triple. It does feel smaller, but it does not, by any standards, feel lacking. And if you're on domestic roads, get bored of saying it, but there's only so much you can use. If you're only using 10% of your 140 brake horsepower bike, what is the point? I'd say this is just on that level, just on that line, where on a good day, you can run to 100% of this bike's performance. Safely and legally, you are getting the value, the full value of your, what is it, between £7,000 and £8,000? Top job, Triumph. You really have hit it out of the park with this one. And it hasn't got those audience-splitting double headlights, which I don't mind, and I quite like them. They add some character, but not everyone does. Whereas there are very few people that look at a single, clean-looking headlight like this and say, ugh, I hate that. That is minging.
Suffice to say that I really enjoyed it, but then you knew that going in. It's a Triumph, it's a triple, they're two massive boxes ticked for me, and obviously I was pulling in its favour to begin with. But aside from that, looking at it objectively, it is just a really good value for money bike. It sits in the market, I would suggest, as a really, really good entry-level bike for people who are going on maybe to their second bike, possibly even a first. It's not an intimidating bike. And the fact that you've got a limited amount of horsepower, so you might look at it on paper and say it's only 80 brake horsepower, it's only 64 newton meters of torque, you know, it's only a small baby bike. But there's an argument to be said for being able to use all of the bike, or the majority of the bike's performance, most of the time, as opposed to maybe only using 50% of your 140 brake horsepower bells and whistles bike. It's just a shame when you can't use that. If you've got the ability to, if you've got the option to, like you're going to take it on a track, then great. This isn't really what that's geared towards. This is a do everything, happy middle ground bike. And for the market that would sit at, for people maybe going for an entry level bike or a second bike, the fact that this is £7,195 as well makes it more affordable than some of the competition. Either way, as I will always say, take it out for yourself, test it. Even if you're not looking at this bike, the fact that it's winning all the awards, I would always recommend trying what people tout as the best in that field against whatever else you're looking at. And it will tell you some things whether you are right or whether you still prefer the bike you prefer, or whether you want to go for this one. Comments and questions, drop them down below. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
Oh, lofted out the seat. Oh look, Guy Martin's back in my helmet. Oh, it's been a while, son. It's been a while since I've done me Guy Martin. It's also been a while since I've ridden roads like this. It takes you a little while to dial your head in, so wake yourself up. Once you're there, oh, it's cracking, belting.